Welcome to the Ultimate Life Through Hustle and Prayer. We have Dr. Jeff here with us today. In my book, I have him down as Mr. Awesome, and you're going to find out why. I could tell you about Jeff, but I'd rather you hear it directly from him. Jeff, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Carlos. I appreciate it. I'm excited to talk about all these things that we're going to get into for men and help people improve their lives. My background is interesting. I started off studying medical anthropology. I focused on Latin American indigenous cultures and ethnobotany. And I was 19 at the time. I had no idea I'd be eventually working at a plant medicine facility and I'd be doing all this kind of cool stuff. So it was a really nice intro to kind of get grounded in what's the indigenous practices of Latin American society that goes way back to the beginning of time. So I started off my career with that. Then I applied to PhD programs in medical anthropology. I got into a couple, got into Berkeley. I decided I want to do research for a year first because I didn't want to go be an academic guy for the rest of my life if I wasn't really committed. So I did some med anthro research for about a year. I was at the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute, and I studied prenatal diagnostic screening procedures for Latin American women. And it was really interesting, super cool. But I learned that I didn't really want to do research my whole life, even though I really liked it. I just wasn't calling me. So I applied to the UCLA School of Public Health. I got a master's degree in public health there, and it was in health policy development, program management, and health law. And that was really, really good and helped me administrate and manage healthcare facilities and get them licensed and all this stuff. Again, something that was really useful to me in my current job. But at the time, I didn't really know what that was leading to. And during that time, I was running a couple clinics at UCLA, and there were OBGYN facilities. And I decided I wanted to go to medical school. So I took all my pre-meds, got a post-bac in biochemistry, and then applied to medical school, got in, and then decided that I didn't really want to go do that because I didn't like the way that the Western medical model was focusing on symptoms as opposed to the underlying causes of all different things, whether it was mental health issues or addiction or whatever. So I moved it. After that, I just said, I got to take a break. So I moved to Hawaii, where my wife was from. She was from Maui. So we moved to Hawaii, and I started working for the Department of Health of Hawaii. And I had a case management position where I worked with all these Hawaiian families. And it was amazing. I learned a ton because I did culturally sensitive healthcare approaches for Native Hawaiian families and their kids. And then I realized I wanted to get a doctorate in psychology so I could actually diagnose people and kind of work at a higher level. So that's where I moved back to LA, got my doctorate in psych. Then I started managing, did all these different internships, worked in a locked psychiatric hospital, managed one of the units there, had a private practice. And then I was managing Passages Malibu, which is a pretty well-known rehab. And that's where I met a certain guy who we all know, Jerry Powell. And he was a patient there. And him and I hit it off and clicked. And he was the guy that eventually sort of led me towards plant medicine after Passages. And so I had a lot of background in management and legal stuff with healthcare. And when we decided to open up this place in Costa Rica called Rhythmia Life Advancement Center, I was the guy that wrote the license with the government. It took me 2 years to do it because it's the first place in the world to ever have like a medical license to administer ayahuasca. And so that was really interesting for me. I learned a ton working with a bunch of attorneys, the Ministry of Health, and all this cool stuff. And eventually we opened. So I'm currently now the chief medical officer here at Rhythmia, and I manage all the staff, and I keep us compliant with the government, and I keep us safe and medically appropriate. And I work with shamans and healthcare providers and all these different people, and we see about 96 guests a week, and it's just going really well, and it's super exciting. So that's basically me, that's what I do.
Well, that's part of why I call you Mr. Awesome, Jeff. I mean, the work that I've personally seen you guys at Rhythmia. I get to go there 4 times a year with Teta Juanito and get to see firsthand how you are changing people's lives, how you're making their lives something that they want to live. So when you were dealing with very high net worth individuals, high functioning addicts, what were some of the things that you discovered about the human psyche and the psyche of success?
Well, what I've realized in working with all different levels of people that have addictions, whether it was the high end group at Passages, high net worth people, or whether it was even a homeless population that I dealt with earlier in my career, what I realized is that there was a lot of internal struggle that people went through. And there's often, if not 100% of the time, some underlying causes that are leading them to try to escape or to block painful emotion or to try to run really from themselves. And drugs and alcohol provide a great way to do that on a temporary basis. And we all know that leads down a horrible path of health problems and all kinds of trauma and just disasters, right? So, um, the key that I noticed in working with people that have an addiction, whether it was a behavioral addiction, because that can be behavioral addictions or sex addiction, eating disorders, all kinds of behavioral stuff. That's an addiction, can be as well. Then there's the substance addictions like drugs and alcohol. And what I was noticing is a lot of these people were totally unplugged from themselves. They had split from their true self. And I believe through the thousands of patients I've worked with that everybody goes through this split at some point in their life. Usually it's at a very young age, between ages of 4 and 7. And that's where they learn that it's not safe to be themselves, because whether they're in an abusive environment or they are neglected, abandoned by caregivers, whatever the reason, they learn that they need to show the world something else that's not really them. And this persona that's fueled by the ego sort of takes over. And then they're older in their life and they really don't know who they are. And they have a hard time with emotional regulation. And that's when drugs and alcohol come into the picture, and it buffers it, it numbs it, it pushes it off to deal with at a later date in theory. And that's where I would get involved with them, and we would notice this. So I basically, I believe that most people with addiction have trauma, and if it's not childhood trauma, it's recent trauma that's been caused by their addiction. Absolutely.
How do you overcome this? The word that you used when we were off camera was internal strife.
Yeah.
How do you overcome this to lead not to just have a successful bank account, but how do you overcome this so that you have a truly successful life?
Well, in order to overcome internal strife, you have to become vulnerable. And if people have trauma, especially from childhood, it's really scary to become vulnerable, because vulnerable means, in a sort of a common way, it means weakness to some. And being vulnerable is a scary proposition. And so, being vulnerable is actually a powerful thing to be, but it has to be done in a safe way. It has to be done with a purpose, with intention. Because if I was vulnerable as a kid, well, I got in trouble or I got hurt. I was in danger. So in order to be vulnerable as an adult, that means I have to open up and let a process help change me. And so that process can be my own internal goals. It can be my own therapy. It can be plant medicine, which is my favorite. It can be a lot of these different modalities. But I think the way to overcome internal strife is to realize that there's some trauma there that needs to get processed. And processing trauma is a big, big deal. And most people that have addictions have this.
What is the common trait that you have found between all high net worth, high functioning entrepreneurs?
They're extremely creative, and they have a lot. They're usually very smart, and they're actually very emotionally sensitive. And the emotional sensitivity that they have deep down has been blocked because they've been told, or they've learned somehow that it was not good to be that way. So they've really blocked it. And so most of the guys that I've met, men and women, that are high success people that have addictions or struggling with stuff, they're very, very emotionally sensitive. But they've gotten way past it, and they're just, it's scary, and they don't really want to look at it because it makes them, like I was saying, it makes them feel vulnerable.
Jeff, as a doctor, what is it? What would be the role that you see women playing in today's world? As a doctor that's done a lot of work with women and in Latin America and the Western world, and so you've run the gambit. You've been to places that are very connected with nature, with tribes that are very connected with nature, with lifestyles that are very connected with nature, and you've seen the Western world that at times is very disassociated from nature. Where do you see men and women, and what is the role of women and men? Like, in other words, what's the new synergy between men and women?
Well, I think what's happened historically over time, especially in the Western culture, is that women's empowerment has been pushed down, and men have asserted themselves in such a way that they are the dominant gender as far as empowerment with careers and government and society. And what's happened as a result of that is that society has very much suffered, and pushing down women and trying to kind of rule over women is never a good idea, because all the data shows, worldwide data that has been collected, shows that if women in a particular society have control over their reproductive rights, and they also have the resources to survive and to feed their families, what happens is the whole society rises. And so what I believe the new synergy is between men and women is that the more men help facilitate women empowerment, and the more that men are sensitive to the women's issues, everyone in society will rise. It's not this thing about men being in charge and men pushing down women, because that just doesn't go well. It leads to wars, it leads to famine, it leads to genocide, it leads to all these horrible things. And all of society suffers, women and children, and everybody does. So I believe that the new sort of modality, not that it's new, it's just being revisited now, is that the more you empower women, the better society is going to be. And that's our job as men, because in the West, men are in this role where they have these abilities to make these decisions about who gets hired, who gets fired, and they're in the power position. And so it's about men allowing and facilitating women empowerment. I'm really a big fan of that.
So, what are practical ways that you can share to empower women?
For example, I pride myself on being a manager of a facility that protects women. And what I mean by that is there's not ever going to be a woman that I work with or that I deal with as a patient that's ever going to think that I have any sort of uh, ulterior motives or bad intentions with them. My own internal process is pure, as pure as it can be. Of course, I'm not perfect, but it's my own sort of mentality when I'm dealing with people, men or women, is that I want the greatest good for these individuals. And when you roll with that sort of energy, that's what the people feel. And then what that does is it allows, for example, in the case with women, it allows them to feel safe. It allows them to have their own process. It allows them to feel a bit empowered. And then they can rise up and take assertiveness, and they can have success in their jobs. So what I see is as like a tool is just basically respecting everybody and respecting everybody's process, and setting aside my own personal agenda for me, whatever that might be. It's putting that aside and looking at what is a client centered or a staff centered necessity. And I think that I've been able to do that in different facilities I've worked at, where it creates this sort of environment of fairness, for everybody. And that's something that we can look at as men and see, like, well, how am I treating the women in my job, or how am I treating the women in my family? It allows us to kind of look at each individual and see the good and the beauty in them, and allow that to flourish, and just allow it to grow.
So, let's say there's a guy, um, that recognizes he's having issues with women. Maybe it could be ulterior motives, like you said. Maybe there's a sexual agenda, or maybe there's just a lack of acceptance of women in a power role, or what you would call a directorship role, or there's a difficulty in accepting just counsel from women. Any of these scenarios, what can a guy do to heal this? What can a guy do to overcome this?
Well, I think first and foremost, that particular male would really need to look inside and see what are they afraid of within themselves. Because the way that men treat women is fear based. Because if men fear women, they want to keep them down and push them down because they're afraid of what a woman's empowerment vibe would mean to them. And really, what it means to a man when they're with empowered women, what it means is that they're allowed to be their whole selves. And so, if men are not comfortable with their whole self, then that's what comes out in sort of a redirected approach towards the way they handle women. So it is very important that men, if they're struggling with this sort of stuff with women, that they look inside themselves and they break through whatever insecurities they feel that are independent of women. It's about their own internal issues, their own internal process. So there's lots of modalities that allow for that, but in society, they're not, if a man tries to look at himself, or if a man is sensitive, in the old school way, it's kind of like, well, you're weak, you're a sissy, you're a woman yourself, that's what people, that's what society says, right? So it's about overcoming those sort of stigmas and stereotypes to really go inside and to look at who we are as men, and to really let that, process out, so that we're not intimidated and we're not afraid of anybody. We're not worried about other people, especially not women, and we want them to flourish. That's a key concept.
And what are just if you can name just a few specific modalities or tools that a guy could use? Obviously, going to Rhythmia is top on the list.
Yeah.
So, but take from what are just give me a few ideas, or yeah, just a few things that a guy could practical that could put into practice.
Well, nowadays there's a lot of these men's groups, and also the kind of video series that you're doing that are male specific, and they're focused on empowering men to look at themselves and to feel that they can work and talk about these issues. So there's a lot of men's groups out there, a lot of sort of new things that are coming up for men, because we all realize that this is an issue. So that's one modality, is to kind of get involved with men's groups and chats and different kind of stuff that discusses these things. That's really, really cool. There's a lot of people doing that now. And the other thing that you mentioned is with Rhythmia is that it's plant medicine based, and we all know that what plant medicine is great at doing, it's helping us connect to ourselves. It's showing us who we are, and it's allowing us to make peace with that. Because if I'm unclear about who I am as an individual and I have unresolved trauma, that's going to hinder me, and it's going to creep out into my life even if I don't notice it. And so plant medicine is a great one to do that, ayahuasca in particular. And then again, men's groups, talk therapy, and activities that help a person. I like to call it a daily practice. And what it is anything that somebody chooses to do that helps them plug into themselves. And the traditional things that we always hear about are meditation and yoga and prayer and that kind of thing. That's all good, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be like for myself, I like to go surf, and surfing for me is my time to plug into me and connect with me. I like to exercise. That's also something that's really mind focused and helps me with connect. And so those are some things that men can do to try to like get to know themselves, because that's the biggest thing, is that we don't really know who we are, and that's why it's spilling out into these areas that are not always helpful to other people, especially women.
Jeff, this is a two-part question now. In your experience as a doctor, what is the correlation between success and fidelity? And why are so many men, it's just men in general, I was going to say alpha types, but I don't think it's exclusive to alpha type. Why are men in general so driven to have sex with probably as many women as possible. But it's not every guy that's like that, but it's certainly a high percentage of us that are like this. So
Yeah.
what is that? What is the correlation between fidelity and
Mhm.
success? And where does that underlying drive to have sex with as many women as possible come from?
Well, to start off that two-part question, there's biological things, right, that are about, that are ancient, ingrained in us as biology, that has to do with reproduction, and also, if you think about an indigenous culture way back when, there was a high mortality rate for infants being born. A lot of that, there's a lot of death early on because of disease and resources and things. So it was a biological sort of evolutionary drive to impregnate as many women as possible, because that would allow for the growth of the community. So there's that sort of biological thing that's in there, that's kind of underlying, I guess, just humanity. And now what's happened, of course, is that, as society progresses, especially in Western culture, there's become certain social norms surrounding sexual behavior and what's appropriate and what's not. And there's oftentimes what's let's say more common is that a man and a woman, just a couple, it doesn't have to be a man and a woman, but a couple decide that they're going to be together and they're going to be monogamous with each other, for example. But what happens is, especially with men, because they have this underlying sort of drive that's biological, and then if you bring in a high level of success into that, there's an entitlement issue. And there's also a narcissism that can permeate. And a lot of studies show, it's unfortunate this is the case, but a lot of studies show that the highest successful people in the world, the CEO types and the high up presidential type people, they often have narcissistic personality disorder. And what that means is that I'm more important than anybody else I deal with, and the world revolves around me, and I'm entitled to do whatever it is I want because I'm the most important person in the room. And so that's sort of a psychological condition that it actually is fueled by the way society views success. And so if somebody gets into these positions, it doesn't have to be a CEO type, but like you said, like, it doesn't have to be an alpha. But what happens is the more success that somebody has, oftentimes the more entitled they become, and they feel that they're above certain societal norms. And that's what leads, combined with the biological side, is what leads to all this sort of sexual behavior that can be hurtful, and it can be destructive, especially when it's done secretive. And that's the big part of this, is there's this secretive nature to it. And anything that's in the shadows or that's secretive leads to other behaviors that are also secretive, like addiction, or other behaviors that are in the dark, you could say. And that also, by the way, lowers self-esteem. It also eats at the soul, and it causes us to feel really bad about ourselves. And that's what leads to more drinking or more drug use or more outlandish behavior. It's sort of like this vicious cycle. So that's kind of like, basically, in my opinion, like why things have gotten the way they have, in the last 100 years or whatever.
And how does fidelity play into success?
Well, I think, again, it all depends on the person, because everybody's different. Everybody's unique. They have a unique set of circumstances that have led them to where they're at in their life. But I think we have to make room for personal choice, but we also have to understand that our choices affect other people. And if I'm in a committed monogamous relationship, well, that's what I agreed to. And if my partner is not aware of my behavior on the side, well, that is hurtful to not only that person, but also to myself. And so I think it's about healthy communication. And I think that fidelity with success, the people that, if you see like somebody that has a lot of integrity at any level of success, what integrity means is it's truth, and it's honor, and it's loyalty. And those are traits that lead to a lot of really good things for society also. And so I think that the more somebody is successful, it's really up to them to stay in a vibe that is authentic with sort of an integrity role. And that's a big part of just somebody's energy. So like, when you meet somebody who has a lot of integrity, you just feel safe around them and you feel comfortable, and there's somebody that you can respect and connect to. But when you meet somebody that has no integrity, it's almost like it's very uncomfortable feeling, and you don't trust that person. And that is isolating to the individual that is behaving like that. And so really what's happening is the more that these behaviors are dysfunctional for an individual, the more it leads them down this road of isolation. And I believe that a big part of the human existence is to not be isolated, but it's actually to have community, and it's to have connection, and not only with family, but also with friends and community. And so I think that, the more somebody is aware of these things, the more success they have, and also the happier they are. And I think that's the goal in life, really, is to be happy. And I always say it's two things. I say it's the goal of life is to be happy and to have success in the ways that they choose to be successful in.
That's beautiful, because society seems to have a norm of what success is, but the individual has to give him or herself permission to live success the way that they define it, the way that
Yes.
they feel that joy, that happiness, that reciprocity with life.
Yes. Like, for example, in Costa Rica, there's often these surveys and these polls and reports that come out worldwide that say that Costa Ricans are the happiest people in the world, and I agree. And if you look at Costa Rica, it's a very small country. It's not a rich country as far as money is concerned, but it's a beautiful country, and everybody is pretty happy with where they're at. And they're not living in these mansions, they're not driving a Mercedes, but they are happy. And I think that that's the key, is that they have happiness and success in the ways that they are choosing to have them in, and they're comfortable with where they're at. And that's what leads to like this momentum of like contentment that they have here, at least here in Costa Rica. It's a really cool place to live.
An amazing place.
It
I'd have to
is.
live at least to visit.
Yeah.
Have some of that happiness swag drip on you and take it back home.
That's right. Yeah.
Jeff, there's a phrase that we hear often, and now even more and more. It's like it's permeated into TV and movies, and it's oh, you have mommy issues. Oh, you have daddy issues. So first, could you help us understand what are mommy issues? What are daddy issues? How do they affect us in life, and how do we heal from them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's say I have mommy issues, for example, which I don't. But I probably do a little bit. I think we all do. But let's say I have mommy issues. Well, what that means is that I did not receive from my mom the necessary developmental milestones that a mother is providing to their children, whether that be unconditional love, um, boundaries, success in a family culture that's based on like who I am as an individual, like all the motherly roles that are supposed to be done with a child. Let's say that I didn't receive those in a functional way, and that my mom was, let's say, unavailable or didn't care or had a drug addiction herself, as an example. Well, what that means is that I didn't hit during my developmental years, which are ages 0 to 12. During those 0 to 12 years, I didn't get what I needed to emotionally develop in a healthy way. So what that means is that I'm seeking it constantly in relationships, and I'm seeking it from others, even as an adult. And then what happens is I marry my mom, because I want to do what's called a trauma reenactment, because I want to create a similar situation that I had as a child in my marriage. And then I want to replay out certain scenarios so that I can hopefully overcome those situations and prove that I am lovable, that I am somebody who's good, and all this. And it's a subconscious process. We don't know we're doing it. And so that's an example of what like mommy issues are. And I keep playing it out with over and over again with relationships, and all the women I'm with and choose to be with and marry. They're all the same sort of scenario over and over and over again. And it's like that for girls with daddy issues, or men with daddy issues. Same thing. It's like I'm playing out scenarios with people that I never really got from my caregivers when I was a kid. And that, by the way, trauma reenactment does not work. It does not work. It actually leads to more trauma and makes things worse, to tell you the truth. So there's certain ways to deal with that. And again, it's more about, again, like we've been kind of talking about in this discussion, it leads to just inner work and realizing, that I am a good person, that I am lovable, that I am working on things. I'm not perfect. I'm working on things and I'm growing. And people around me did the best they could, and my parents did the best they could. Luckily, I had great parents myself, but a lot of people don't. It's very common not to have good parents, and it sets the stage for future issues. And people play this out their whole life. Some people never resolve it. It's really sad, to see. I've seen a lot of that, where people just never get to the bottom of it, and they're always discontent somehow.
What are ways that we can heal from those missed landmarks that we had with our parents?
Well, what those missed landmarks usually equate to at the end of the day is basically just self-esteem. And it's just realizing that who we are as individuals is good, and that we all have things we work on, and let's say, I guess you could call them flaws. And I don't like that word because it means that we have these negative sort of things, but it's not about that. It's just about maybe things we're trying to improve and work on. And the best way to do that I've seen, and the reason why I quit everything I was doing in Los Angeles at the top of my career, a huge private practice, running facilities, managing people, the reason I left it all and came to Costa Rica is because I saw the benefits of plant medicine for all these issues. It's undeniable what happens for people that go through this process. And I know you've seen it many, many years longer than I have. And it's truly a miracle that's happening with what's going on with plant medicine as a modality to help people resolve these inner conflicts and to get the empowerment and self-esteem they need to move forward. And what's they realize is that all the stuff they needed is within themselves. They don't need an external source. We all think we do, but really everything we need is within us. And once we see that, everything inside of us starts to expand, and then we grow, and it's an infinite process of just growing and learning. And that's what I'm seeing every single week down here at Rhythmia. It's seriously the most amazing work that I've ever witnessed in my entire career.
Jeff, let me ask you. We talk about healing. We talk about looking inside of yourself, modalities, and you used a very powerful word, miracles. For a person like me, these words are second nature. It's what I feel that I live. It's how I feel that I am. But for a person that is looking for more data, more scientific proof, research, could you explain to us what is happening from a medical standpoint when one begins to drink ayahuasca or yahe?
Yes, definitely. That's like my specialty area, which I've been studying for the last 5 years. I love it. So I'm really into this. So basically, what's going on? There's the thing. All of us have a molecule inside of us already called dimethyltryptamine. All living things have it, plants and animals and people. And
Also known as DMT.
DMT, exactly. We all have this inside of us. And the regions of the body that it exists is in the lining of the lungs, behind the eyes, in part of the cerebral spinal fluid. And some people believe it comes from the pineal gland. They haven't been able to prove that. It's a theory. And the reason they can't prove it is because it's really hard to do in vivo studies on somebody that's alive. So you don't want to cut open somebody's brain and dig in there when they're alive, right? So, and then once somebody dies, everything sort of changes super fast, and you can't get in there to try to like check it out. So it's nearly impossible to actually prove that it comes from the pineal gland. But that's a really good theory. I believe that it does. And so What this molecule is it's our connection to ourselves and our environment. It's our intuitive nature. It's the way that we feel somebody else's energy and how we recognize it. And it's a very important molecule that also is excreted in a high amount as people pass on and die. And there's a lot of this molecule that gets put out into the body, and it's also there all the time too. And depending on what's going on. People meditate, it comes out. People do yoga, it comes out. And what's happening with plant medicine is, with ayahuasca in particular, the active ingredient is DMT, and you drink it, and then what happens is you have more of this molecule, and then what happens is your amygdala is a part of the brain that stores your subconscious memories. And let's say I was scared by a dog at age 5. And now I'm an adult, I'm 50, and I'm still afraid of dogs. I don't really know why I am, because everybody else likes dogs and dogs seem to like me, but I just have this aversion, right? So what happens is I drink ayahuasca, my amygdala opens up and connects with my prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain where our conscious, rational sort of awareness is. And it's our thinking and our consciousness. And what happens is these neuron pathways in the amygdala connect with the prefrontal cortex, and I go, oh, wait a minute. I see that age 5, I was scared by this pit bull that almost bit me, and it was important at that age that I was scared and that I stayed away from that dog or other dogs like it to survive. It's a survival instinct. It's a very natural process to live. And so then what happens is the emotions surrounding that dog attack surface during a plant medicine session. And then I feel fear, or I feel anger, or I feel confusion. And all those emotions that are locked into that belief about a dog being scary surface, and I feel them for a moment, and then they leave me. And then there's a concept in neurochemistry called synaptic plasticity, where the brain will build a new neuron pathway. It'll grow and generate this new awareness. And basically what it says, to make this example, is that dogs are not scary. Dogs are okay. Dogs are my friend. And so then I develop a new neuron pathway, and now I'm cool. And now I'm good with dogs. And so that's an example of what happens under the influence of ayahuasca. There's a neurochemical process going on, mostly related to dopamine and serotonin. Because if I have, let's say, depression, there's 2 things related to depression that cause this situation. There's often a neurochemical deficiency of dopamine. So I have a little bit of low dopamine, let's say naturally. So I feel sad. Then there's a behavioral component. Maybe I've made poor choices. Maybe I am not happy with my life. Maybe whatever. And so there's like a behavioral side. So what happens with plant medicine is it goes in, it resets the dopamine receptors in the brain. It also resets 5 key serotonin receptors, and it gets everything balanced so that the neurochemical side of depression is fixed, and the neurochemical side of anxiety with serotonin is also fixed. And then I can deal with the behavioral side. I can go, oh, well, I see that I'm upset at myself because I didn't really do the career I wanted, or I'm upset with my marriage for whatever reason, and I have this awareness. So it's like a 2-pronged approach to deal with depression, anxiety, and other issues like trauma. And so there's a lot of neurochemistry going on that I really enjoy, because some people don't understand all the time what's going on in their plant medicine journey. They get a little confused by all the imagery or the feelings they're having. And I always just tell them, well, don't worry about it, because what's happening is your neurochemistry is resetting and you're processing a lot of stuff that you might not have even remembered. So just go with the flow, let it happen. And afterwards, you're going to feel like $1 million. You're going to feel clear and grounded. And that's the beauty of like what's going on science-wise with the plant medicine.
How can plant medicine help me have a better relationship with other people, especially family, wife, kids, mother, father?
I believe that a healthy relationship means that somebody can be empathic with another person. So there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. So sympathy means that if I see a homeless guy, I can go, I feel bad for that guy. It seems like that would be hard. And I see that he's upset, but I don't feel it. I just can observe it and I can maybe understand it intellectually a little bit. That's sympathy. But empathy is the ability to actually feel what someone else is feeling. And there's only one way you can do that: if you're connected to yourself. Because if you're not connected to yourself, you're not plugged into you, it is impossible to have true empathy for anyone. And so the best way to build healthy relationships with family, with spouses, with kids, with friends, community, is that you're connected to yourself, and then you can allow a connection with others that's real. Because if I absorb somebody's energy and I can feel their emotions, I know who they are. And if I can feel someone's sadness in me, the last thing I want to do is hurt them, because I'm going to feel it. I'm going to be hurt. So I don't want to create destruction or pain or any sort of situation for anybody, because I have true empathy. And I think that is the key to world peace. That is the key to ending wars. That is the key to society's sort of progression towards the shift that's occurring in the world, is that true empathy must happen. And the only way I can do that is being plugged into myself, and I know who I am, and I have love for myself first. And then I can connect and have that love and that understanding of everybody else.
So let's say that I'm sitting here and I'm like, Jeff, this sounds great, Doc. It's fascinating. But the truth is, I have a pretty good relationship with my wife and my kids. I'm pretty happy with my parents. My job or my business are going well. Everything in my life is good. Why do I need to go to arrhythmia, or why do I need to take ayahuasca?
That sounds exactly what I used to think about me. That was exactly how I felt. When Jerry wanted me to come down and do plant medicine the first time, because it changed his life. This is the guy I worked with, right? And back in LA, it completely changed his life for the better. He turned over a new leaf. It was amazing. He said, "You're going to go do it." And I said, "Oh, I don't need to. I'm a psychologist. I'm happy. I have kids. I'm married. I've done a lot of work on myself. I have a pretty happy life. I'm successful. I don't need to do it." And he's like, "Too bad, you're going anyway." So I said, "All right." So I did it. I did not know how I was being perceived in the world by other people. I was completely unaware. I did not understand that I had a bit of an intimidating, scary sort of buffer between me and everybody else. And I knew that, I grew up in a rough part of Los Angeles. I grew up in a gang environment, and it was rough and scary and all this stuff, but that was just what I was used to. I mean, my whole neighborhood was like this. My family was poverty level, federal welfare system my whole life. And it was just normal. I wasn't tripping on it. I wasn't mad about it. But I realized that in order to survive as a little kid, I had to become a tough guy and to survive in my neighborhood. And so what happened was I carried this on into my later years. I remember one time I had an internship, went up for my doctorate, and you have to do four of these things for your degree, and they're each a year long, so it's pretty involved. And at the end of each one of these, your supervisor will pull you in and give you like a last 2 hour sort of evaluation, final sort of thing, and sign off your hours and all this. And my supervisor, I did well at this particular place, and he says, "Jeff, one more thing. I need you to know something." I'm like, "Okay, what?" I thought everything was cool, right? And he's like, "This whole year, I was afraid of you. I was intimidated by you." I was like, "Dude, what are you talking about? You're my supervisor." On the contrary, I was a little intimidated by you because you held my future in your hands. He's like, "No, no, no. You're somebody that comes across to people as intimidating. And you need to look at that, because you're going to be working with people that are very vulnerable. And if you are scaring them, they're not going to feel safe. You're not going to be successful." So I was like really confused by that. I didn't understand what the heck that was. So several years later, I did plant medicine. And what I realized was, as a little kid growing up in East Los Angeles, I was just afraid. I was scared to death. And I wasn't in tune with it, because I was seeing death and destruction all the time. I was hearing gunshots every night. There was a lot of brutality going on all around me. Friends I had that were shot and killed. I mean, it's just brutal. I was afraid. And so what I did to deal with my fear is I became this certain persona that was intimidating. and I was still doing it. And I saw that on plant medicine. So what ended up happening for me, because I thought that I was fine, and I guess on paper you could say that I was, but I was really not truly happy, and I wasn't truly plugged into myself. And my relationships were not that great. I had anger issues. I was not connected like I thought I was. And all that changed on plant medicine. I was able to love myself, know myself, and then I could connect in a way better manner. And I had two more kids after that, and I'm a much better dad. My first two kids, I'm a good dad, but man, they went through the ringer with me because I was just in la la land. And so these two little ones that I got now, they're getting a different version of me. And now I'm making up for the lost time with the other two. And I'm being the dad that I really truly am inside, that I'm able to show. And I owe that to plant medicine 100%.
That's beautiful, Jeff. Thank you for sharing that. That's deep, bro. Hmm. Jeff, let me ask you from a practical point of view. Over there at Rhythmia, what's the number one, number two? Not a particular order, but what are some of the top? I just want to give real world examples of miracles that happen. Real things that just mind blowing, out of the ordinary that you've seen happen.
I think that ayahuasca is really good for many issues, but what I see as the biggest breakthroughs are veterans of the military that come to Rhythmia. Because if you think about what a veteran is, right? A veteran is somebody that had to go into battle and dissociate from themselves to survive. Their emotions would be in the way during a battle, so they were taught how to unplug from their emotions, and they go into fight. And so what happens is during the battle, they're behaving to survive. They're following commands. They're following orders. Their emotions are blocked and out of the way. Then after the battle, they're supposed to come back and connect, but they don't. They stay unplugged. They stay dissociated. Then they come home, develop drug and alcohol issues, high suicide rate, all this pain and anguish, and this sort of like unplugged theme that goes on in their life. Their relationships suffer. Everything sucks. These guys and women come to Rhythmia. They plug into themselves. They process all the emotions they had during the battle or during their life in general, and then they get to resolve it. And then they feel so happy and such at peace. And the analogy I give is that every single person is a veteran of their own life. They don't have to be a soldier. They've been through their own war. They had to survive. And so what's going on weekly at Rhythmia is that people are processing all this battle time, whether it was in a childhood in an abusive house or as a military person out on the battlefield. And what happens is truly amazing. They become back to who they are as individuals, and it's an amazing thing to see. We have veterans every single week. And it's not just the military. We got veterans from life that come here, It's really beautiful to see. I love it.
Jeff, let me ask you, what do you see? First, I'm going to ask you a question that I know the answer to is, do you feel that having a spiritual roadmap in your life is key to success?
I do. And the reason for that is because I believe that we have a spiritual self. And I believe that our spiritual self is perfect and all knowing. And our physical self is imperfect and we're learning. And there's a reason for that duality. The more we listen to our spiritual self, the more our physical self gets on board with what's correct for us. And if I don't have a spiritual roadmap, I'm just wandering around with my own just intellectual ability, which is very limited, and I'm easily manipulated, and I'm easily controlled and influenced because I'm just following what my brain is telling me all the time, and I'm influenced by governments and big business and pharmaceutical industry or whatever the heck. But if I have a spiritual roadmap, which is my authentic self, my true me, that is going to point me in the right direction all the time. So the more that I'm connected with my physical self to my spiritual self, the more peace and success I'm going to have. Now, I believe that when we drink plant medicine, our physical self vibrates at the frequency of our spiritual self. And that's what allows the connection. And so that's why during plant medicine, there's all these breakthroughs, and people see with their spiritual eyes and they feel with their spiritual self. And that's why they have all this awareness. And it's actually a very familiar territory. People often get scared thinking, oh, I don't know what this is going to be like. I've never done anything like this. I said, it's going to seem like home to you, is what it's going to feel like. And that's what it is. It's home. It's your true authentic self. So a spiritual roadmap is so, so key. It's what this whole thing's about.
So, Jeff, let's say that one of your children comes up to you one day and says, Dad, you're a doctor. You've helped a lot of people. And Dad, you've seen people that are spiritually poor and money rich. You've seen people that are money rich and money poor and spiritually rich, right? Spiritually poor and money rich. And you've seen people that are truly happy. So you've seen everything, Dad. And I'm about to go out into the world, and I want to know, what do you think is the formula for success?
That's a great question. I'm about to get that question from my daughter who's applying to law school next year. So that question is coming. So
Here's the warm up.
the warm up. She's the oldest one. She's the warm up. So this is what I would tell her. If you follow your heart and you follow what your spiritual path is indicating for you, and you put as a priority your spiritual well-being, everything else will fall into line. Now, we all need to make money to survive. We all need to have certain levels of success to get by. We all have to sort of play the game to some degree in society to pay the bills and to just get through life. And that's part of what life is about. And that's a part of growing and learning about things. However, if that becomes the focus, money or status or material items, if that's the focus, you will lose out on all the other parts of what society and living your life is really about. So definitely keep in mind the goals of success economically and things that are important, but you have to make the priority the spiritual side and listening to your heart and following your soul. That is key, number one, must happen.
That's beautiful, man. How would you tell her if she said, well, Dad, how do I listen to my heart? How do I listen to my soul?
What I tell people that have asked me this question before is you have to build confidence in the process. So what I tell people is this: there's a voice that we have. It's our higher self. There's also an intuitive sort of vibe. Now, some people have it really strong, and some people have it less strong. The stronger it is, I believe, is because people have made the right decisions more so, or they're not blocking it with drugs and alcohol and other behavior. So, for example, if you have a choice to make, two things: go to law school or not, let's say. Well, ponder it, sit with it, think out pros and cons of both, then feel what's right. Don't think about what's right. You already thought about it for probably a year. Feel what's right. What feels right? And this is the way you can know. How do you feel when you think about going to law school, as an example for a decision? How do you feel? Well, I feel calm and I feel grounded. I feel excited. I feel a peaceful feeling. Okay, good. How do you feel if you decide to scrap law school and just go start working somewhere? Well, I feel nervous. I feel worried. I feel anxiety. Okay. Choose the one that you feel the more positive emotions on, and then let's see how that plays out. So then she chooses to go to law school. Okay, boom. Then she ponders and sits with herself after she's in her first year, and she goes, wow, I'm so glad I did this because I feel good about it. I'm successful in it. I'm getting good grades. I'm moving forward. Okay, so then she has to remind herself, I made this decision based on how I felt about it. I thought about it. I weighed out what I felt about each. And now I'm going to lock in to that set of emotions that led me on this path. And that's how it grows. That's how it gets stronger. So the more you follow your gut intuition and your emotional side, that's what leads to this, and it opens up and it becomes stronger. Like with patients and with here at Rhythmia, And with staff, I rarely think about what I need to tell them or do. I'm at the point in my life, thank God, where I can feel what I need to do. And I'm going off of my feelings. And that's because I really thought about the process while it was happening. And I locked into certain cues that I get when my spiritual self is leading the way. And that's how you start to build momentum and confidence in it. And you're like that. I know you're like that. And the guys that I've met through you are very much like that. And that's what leads to the smoother and more successful pathway of connection and love.
Listen, I want to preface this by saying that my question that's coming up is not to create an advertisement or a commercial for Rhythmia, but it's
Yeah.
very important, you that are watching this, that I fulfill on my promise to you of giving you tools that actually work. And I'm not a theory person, I'm a direct experience person. I come from the hip and I tell you about only what I've experienced. And I've experienced with me now for years. I've experienced it directly. I've experienced it indirectly by people that have gone there and contacted me. I've experienced it by the ongoing healing or the reoccurring miracles that occur in people's lives after experiencing rhythmia. So I just want you to know that to me, rhythmia is a place, it's a lighthouse of healing. So, Jeff, let me ask you one, how can the rhythmia experience contribute to my success? And two, what can I expect when I go to rhythmia for the first time?
Well, I think what you can expect when you first get to Rhythmia is that you're going to receive a medical intake, and you're going to be met with nurses and doctors and myself, and we're going to evaluate you and make sure that you're all ready to go. And before you ever got to Rhythmia, months in advance usually, you've already been cleared to participate based on your health status. So you show up and we do like a final sort of check-in exam, make sure you're good. And then you're going to be given an orientation where you're going to get a tour of the property. You're going to meet the key staff. You're going to have a nice room. You're going to have a very healthy food that's dieta based, which is a way to eat that helps you with the plant medicine to work more effectively, and it honors the plant medicine. So we have everything in line with the way that the ayahuasca is served. And you're also going to have you're going to meet a great community of people, and you're going to be going to multiple classes that teach you about the plant medicine and teach you about intentions and help you feel confident that what you're there for is the right purpose. And there's a ton of support, and there's a ton of staff, and they're all trained, and they're all very good. And we have 4 plant medicine ceremonies in a week, and it's a week-long program. Usually people check in on Saturday or Sunday, and they check out the following Saturday or Sunday. And it's safe, it's Ministry of Health licensed, and there's just a lot of really amazing people who work there that are there to help support your healing. So that's basically what you can expect when you go there. You're going to get, like I said, 4 plant medicine ceremonies in the week. And there's these 3 intentions that we help set for you. And the first one is show me who I've become. And that's something that helps you connect with yourself. And then the second one is merge me back at my soul at all costs. So that's plugging back in. And the third one is healing your heart. And that's how you get the healing, get the love and the empathy and the growth within. And so after you get that, everything else sort of falls in line with that. So everybody tends to have a multiple intention, which is good. They have their own personal ones. That's great. But when you get these 3, everything else sort of falls in line. So that's basically what people can expect, when they come to Rhythmia.
Now, let me ask you, how can Rhythmia contribute to my success in life?
So the people that you meet at Rhythmia all have something in common. They all want to see who they are. They all want to see who they truly are deep down. Because once you know who you are, and once you see all the amazing stuff that everybody has within them, then you can accentuate those traits in life, and you can really lock into your life purpose. What I tell people, I teach a class on Thursdays, which is near the end of the week. They have the final ceremony on Thursday night, and I'm Thursday morning. I tell them this. I go, if you've gotten all 3 of these intentions, the next ones are, who am I being called to be, and what am I being called to do? And so that is a really key concept, that helps people focus on what their trajectory in life will be. And most of the people that come, well, all of them are either light workers or light warriors because they're here to enact a positive change in the world. It's just like a university of healers that come, and people don't think of themselves like that most of the time. They're stockbrokers or whoever they are, all different careers. But what they learn is that they are here to help heal the world. And they can only do that by healing themselves. So what people can expect the healing is you're really going to plug into yourself. And you're going to figure out what are your amazing traits that you have as an individual. And you can accentuate those in your life to find love and happiness.
I've seen that happen. I've seen, just like you said, the stockbroker type come to Rhythmia and realize they had a lot more to offer the world, a lot more to offer themselves, and a lot more love than they ever thought was possible to live, to experience, to give. Let me
Oh,
ask you
yeah.
something. Sometimes, Rhythmia has been featured in a few documentaries. There's some high-profile celebrities that have gone publicly to talk about Rhythmia. World-class athletes, politicians have come to Rhythmia. So a lot of people think, oh, Rhythmia is only for that strata. But what's the truth? Who is Rhythmia for?
Rhythmia is for everybody. Rhythmia is for everybody. And we have a scholarship program. We give out scholarships every month free for people to come. All they got to do is send us their bio, why they want to come, and that they can't afford it, and we hook them up. So this is for everybody. This is for everybody that wants true healing and wants to come do it in a really safe environment. We're trying to reach anybody in the world that can come. The kids that are 18 and up, and the senior citizens. We've had people in their 90s come here. We've had everybody in between come that need healing and that really want to get to the bottom of what's causing their pain and their anguish.
At Rhythmia, I've met cocktail waitresses. I've met college students. I've met stay-at-home dads. I've met stay-at-home moms. I've met retired individuals, trust fund babies, as they're called. I mean, the full gambit of police officers,
Yeah.
veterans. I mean,
Airline pilots.
airline pilots. So Rhythmia really is for everyone, and
Yeah.
and the scholarship program is something that if you're watching this and you think to yourself, man, Rhythmia is a place that I want to go to, I'm just not sure if I can afford it, check out the scholarship program. But also I'm going to say, check out your spending habits. I think a lot of times we spend money on things, maybe we don't need to have both a Spotify and iTunes account. Maybe we don't need both Amazon Prime and Netflix
Yeah.
or the beers. We spend loose change in a lot of spaces that I think we can be more frugal about. And over time, we realize, wow, I have more disposable income than I realized by cutting out things that I really didn't need in my life.
That's right.
Jeff, let me ask you, what's one book or two books or a course that you would recommend to someone watching this?
I believe there's this really good book that I like that helps people sort of focus on like what are their issues, and it's a cognitive behavioral book that is it's very it's a workbook, and it's something that's really helpful to sort of like write down sort of like what are your goals and your intentions. And it's called Mind Over Mood, and it's a really common book. It's sold everywhere, and Mind Over Mood helps you get sort of like ordered in kind of like what your intentions need to be for when you go get your healing. And it's a great book. It's like a text. It's like a everybody learns it in psychology, and they give it to their patients, and they give it to people that are struggling with stuff, and it's really clear and easy to follow. So Mind Over Mood, and it's on Amazon and all that. And I think that's a really good book to kind of get the ball rolling so they can be effective when they come to Rhythmia.
Well, Jeff, before you go, because I know you're incredibly busy, there's 95 people that just arrived
Yeah.
uh, waiting for you. Let me ask you two more questions, Jeff. First,
Sure.
what does the phrase or the concept, the ultimate life through hustle and prayer, mean to you?
Oh man, I love that, dude. I love that phrase, especially the hustle part. Well, I think, you know, the ultimate life through hustle and prayer, right? That's just the duality of what we're talking about. You got to work hard. You got to put in your effort. You got to like want it. And then you got the prayer. You got to have that spiritual side. You got to rely on that part of you, your higher self, that spiritual self that's connected to God and nature and everything around you. And you got to put those things together. You got to work hard. You got to be assertive and move forward. Again, there's times in life where we do this a lot, and there's times where we have to slow it down. It's okay. But the hustle means that I'm out there to achieve and succeed in these ways that I want to. And without that prayer, it's in vain. So you got to have both. And to me, that's what that means.
Brother, man, thank you so much. Before we let you go, are there any final thoughts, words, anything that you want to share?
I think that, it's interesting because plant medicine and shamanic work and all this kind of stuff is in the West has been minimized because of lack of knowledge and also government control over things that plug people into themselves. Governments are fearful of that because it creates less people that need them. So I hope that my background in medicine and psychology and healthcare for 30 years, at UCLA and other parts of the country in the US, I hope that you guys will listen to like somebody that's been through the whole thing. And I've left that because the people that need this healing need it now. We don't need to wait 10 years for it. You got to get it now. And the Western medical model says that if you have an addiction, you're going to be an addict the whole rest of your life. If you have trauma, you're going to be in therapy for 10 to 20 years. I reject that premise. And I've seen it change it in 1 week here. You have to do the work. You have to go through the process. You have to follow up and stay plugged in and change some habits. But the quickness and the beauty of what's going on is the fast nature of this recovery. We don't want to drag things out. My patients were very high risk people in LA, addicts, trauma, and acute psychiatric. I don't have 10 years with them. I got a couple months at best because they drop out of therapy or they commit suicide or they overdose on drugs. We need the healing as a society right now. And that's why plant medicine is so beautiful, because it gets you back on track immediately. So that's what we're doing. I hope you guys can come check it out.
Well, there you have him. Under my Rolodex, he's Mr. Awesome, also known as Dr. Jeff, Medical
Thanks,
Director of
Carlos.
Rhythmia.
Put
My
vida,
pleasure,
Carlos,
bro.
dude. Thanks for having me on, man. You're one of my favorite people, dude.
I feel the same about you, Mr. Awesome. My brother, Mr. Awesome. If you want to check out Rhythmia, that's RYTHMIA. You can plug it into Google or rhythmia.com and go down there and work with Dr. Jeff. His cohort, Jerry Powell, will be with us in the coming weeks. I love you guys. Thank you so much for everything you do for us, for the world. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for taking the steps to improve your life. May this have served you in your evolution of love, growth, and abundance for your mind, body, and soul. God bless you and God is protected.